What's your message to the new government? Do you think they get the kind of rural economy at all?
No, I don't think any of them have set foot outside Kentish Town for the last 35 years. No, they're a hopeless bunch.
So would you invite Keir to your pub, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister?
No, he's banned. He's the first person to be banned. He's actually on a board in the hall. He's banned.
Why? What have you got against him?
Hello? I thought you were running a news operation.
Keir Starmer just exploded like a microwave burrito. And guess who pulled the plug? Jeremy Puncher producer Clarkson. Yes, the man who's crashed more cars than Starmer's crashed poles just destroyed him in the most gloriously savage way possible. If you thought Starmer had a spine, think again. Clarkson just turned him into political jelly. What did Clarkson say that sent Starmer spiralling into red-faced rage mode? Stick around, because this meltdown is juicier than Boris Johnson's WhatsApp history.
Your figures very much differ from what the figures that the farmers are holding up in their banners today. Do you think those farmers have been gulled, maybe, by some tax-dodging millionaires who want them out there demonstrating like this?
Well, look, I support our farmers. I think it's very important we do so, and that's why we put a huge amount into. We put £5 billion into farming over the next 2 years, and food sustainability. It's hugely important.
What's going
to farmers
on the streets?
Why
are they there?
Well, I think the most important thing that I can do is to engage in dialogue and be absolutely clear. For a typical case, parents wanting to pass on to their child a farm, so that's a typical case. The threshold is £3 million, and that means the vast majority, before anyone pays inheritance tax, that means the vast majority of farms will be totally unaffected by this. And it's important, I think, that I do keep restating that, because that's a very high threshold.
Keir Starmer, the man whose charisma could be outshined by a damp napkin, has once again managed to make headlines, not for doing anything revolutionary, of course, but for getting politically dismantled by, of all people, Jeremy Clarkson. Yes, the same Jeremy Clarkson who once got fired for punching a producer over cold meat. When your political career is reduced to a pile of rubble by the guy who reviews tractors with more passion than Parliament debates, you know you've truly ascended to the Mount Olympus of mediocrity.
Well, today, the country sent a message. And it wasn't whispered, was it? It was roared. From Doncaster to Dover, thousands of everyday Brits stood up and said, enough is enough. This was the Great British National Strike. And despite the media blackout, despite the political snobbery, it happened, didn't it? From the north to the south. In towns, the media usually can't even pinpoint on a map these days. Thousands took to the streets, not activists, not ideologues, just proud Brits who desperately want their country back. They're demanding an end to illegal immigration, net zero, inheritance tax, political attacks on our farmers.
Clarkson's takedown wasn't even surgical, it was agricultural. He didn't slice and dice. He drove a metaphorical Land Rover straight through Starmer's painfully cautious persona, reversed over it, and left the engine running while smoking a cigar, and laughing at the hypocrisy wafting from Westminster like cheap cologne.
Clarkson, and in the next Parliament, I'd like to see the government prioritising farming. We've been asked to diversify, and when we try to do that, the local authorities tell us we can't.
Starmer has been conducting himself with all the courage of a man nervously trying to cancel a gym membership. Every time he speaks, you get the sense he's desperately searching for the most politically sterile answer imaginable. It's like watching someone try to win a boxing match by politely asking their opponent to stop punching. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Just as Starmer's trying to convince people he's not a Tory intern doing work experience in opposition politics, Clarkson shows up and publicly body slams him with the subtlety of a bulldozer at a flower show.
I'm here to support the farmers. It's that simple. So they need all the help they can get, really. If she'd have wanted to take out the likes of James Dyson and investment bankers and so on, she would have used a sniper's rifle. But she's used a blunderbuss and she's hit all this lot. It was, as I understand it, it was a very rushed last-minute decision. And I think, we all make mistakes in life, and I think it's time for them to say, you know what, we this one up a bit and back down. That's my view. So I thought if I told a bunch of people that I'd bought a farm so I could shoot pheasants, it might look bad. So I thought I'd better come up with another excuse. So I said, well,
While the nation's actually begging for authenticity, bold ideas, and, dare we say it, a little personality, Starmer's over here handing out beige policy pamphlets, like he's auditioning for the Office Prime Minister edition. Let's talk about his legendary fence sitting. If indecision were an Olympic sport, Starmer would be waving from the podium with a confused expression and a slightly apologetic smile. He's the kind of guy who, when faced with a question like tea or coffee, calls for a focus group. When Clarkson, whose idea of subtlety is ramming a caravan off a cliff, calls you out for lacking direction, it's not a roast, it's an autopsy.
He will know, of course, that the agricultural industry is one of the most difficult areas to decarbonise, requiring substantial investment. On that basis, will his family farms tax help or hinder?
I'm very pleased that the budget, we put £5 billion over the next 2 years into farming and food sustainability, which is hugely important to support our farmers. He will also, no doubt, have noticed the money that's been allocated to deal with flooding, which is a constant cause of problems for farmers, and the money that's been put into dealing with the outbreak of disease, which is devastating for so many farmers. He will also know.
But it's not just Clarkson's insults that hurt, it's that they rang true. Starmer's entire campaign strategy seems to involve waiting for the Tories to spontaneously combust while he quietly rearranges his spreadsheets. He wants credit for being not as bad as the other guy, which is basically the political equivalent of a restaurant advertising that none of their food has recently killed anyone. And that's the beauty of Clarkson's takedown. It exposed just how flimsy Starmer's political image really is. All it took was one man, a microphone, and a bit of common sense to unravel the illusion that Starmer is some kind of strategic mastermind. Spoiler alert, he's not. He's the guy at the poker table who folds before the cards are dealt. Every time Starmer makes move, you get the sense he's trying to win the affection of people who still think Tony Blair was misunderstood. His idea of boldness is changing the font on a policy document. Remember when the Labour Party used to stand for, something? Starmer seems to think vague disapproval of things is a rallying cry, and not even a passionate disapproval, more like the kind your nan gives when someone puts pineapple on pizza.
Jeremy Clarkson has said, I'm surrounded by farmers and plasterers and brickies and butchers, and all I hear all day long is that there is too much immigration. He said, but if they say this out loud or if they go on a march, they are told by the London elite they are far-right extremists or racist thugs. For the most part, he says, they're not. They're just people who know that they have to shut up when the last post is played and that a cheese rolling down a hill is funny. And he said, the fact is that 4 million people voted for reform. And he said, and more than that voted for Brexit. And Keir Starmer is upsetting them by labelling them as modern-day Hitlers. And he says, I therefore suggest that both he and his friends at the BBC calm down the rhetoric, or we could be heading for some serious trouble. And he's absolutely right.
Meanwhile, Clarkson's over there cracking jokes, making valid points, and somehow becoming the voice of common sense in a political circus. Yes, Clarkson, the man who once tried to cross the English Channel in a Nissan pickup, now sounds more grounded and in touch than the guy who wants to run the country. We have well and truly entered the upside down. And don't even get started on Starmer's economic vision. Or should we say, his economic fog. Watching him explain economic policy is like watching someone try to describe a dream they half remember. It's all a bit vague, a bit abstract, and ends with you wanting to take a nap. Clarkson mocked it by basically implying that even cows have more sense when it comes to managing resources. And frankly, the cows came out of that comparison looking like Nobel laureates. It's almost poetic how the entire situation encapsulates what's wrong with Starmer's approach. He treats politics like a courtroom, constantly appealing to some imaginary neutral judge who will one day pat him on the back and say, well done, you were technically correct. Meanwhile, The country is screaming. Can we have someone who actually believes in something?
Why are you here, Mr. Clarkson?
Well, because I'm here to support farmers.
Right. Are you angry?
It's difficult to be angry on somebody else's behalf. That's like being... Yes, no, I'm not angry on someone else's behalf.
Right. So it's not about you. It's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax.
Classic BBC there. Classic. Oh yeah. It's not the fact that I bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax. The fact.
You told the Sunday Times in 2021 that's why you bought it.
Clarkson, on the other hand, came in swinging, not because he wants to be Prime Minister, God forbid, but because he saw a void of conviction and filled it with the one thing Starmer can't fake: confidence. Say what you want about Clarkson. At least he doesn't try to be someone he's not. It's not just political triangulation, it's political twister. And Starmer's permanently stuck trying to reach left-hand blue while keeping his head firmly lodged somewhere in the centre-right. The tragic comedy of it all is that this was supposed to be Starmer's moment. The Conservatives are melting down faster than a cheap candle in a sauna. Boris is gone, Sunak's approval ratings are being excavated by archaeologists, and yet Starmer still can't break through. Clarkson didn't just point this out, he shouted it with the force of a Top Gear explosion. And everyone laughed, not because it was mean, but because it was true.
She was trotting out. Nobody's affected. Rachel Reeves says so. Since when was the BBC the mouthpiece of this infernal government? I'm going to finish, if I may, with a message to the government. I do. Not a shouty one. It's this. For the sake of everybody here, and for all the farmers who are stuck at home today, paralysed by a fog of despair over what's been foisted upon them, I beg of the government to be big, to accept that this was rushed through, it wasn't thought out, and it's a mistake. That's the big thing to do, admit it, and back down.
You know things are bad when farmers with more tractors than Twitter followers are more politically influential than the leader of the opposition. Clarkson basically implied that the countryside would rather elect a badger than Starmer, and no one disagreed. At this point, Labour's best chance might be photoshopping Jeremy Corbyn out of history entirely and pretending Starmer was born in a moderate think tank fully formed like Athena from the forehead of Blair. And let's not ignore the visuals. When Clarkson criticises you, he does it in a leather jacket with a smirk and the smug energy of a man who's been kicked out of better places than Westminster. Starmer's rebuttal? A press conference with all the excitement of a flat PowerPoint presentation. It was like watching a dial-up modem try to download charisma. Even Starmer's supporters are running out of enthusiasm. You can only defend a man for being not terrible for so long before you start sounding like a hostage video. The Labour base isn't asking for a messiah, they're just asking for someone who can land a punch. Right now, Starmer couldn't land a punch on a sponge in zero gravity.
You got the 96% figure.
Well, you've got 96%. Well, the same place that Rachel Reeves does, from the middle of her head.
Right.
From the Sixth Form Debating Society that she was no doubt a member of, which formed her opinions and yours.
I am not expressing opinions, I'm literally asking you questions. You know that, Mr. Clarkson.
Right.
So, what is your message to this government?
Please back down, please.
And get the money from where?
Well, they've got 40 billion.
It's not that he doesn't care. He probably cares very deeply about metrics and polls and triangulation. But leadership isn't about carefully crafting the least offensive opinion in a lab. It's about standing for something, even if that something gets roasted by Clarkson. And if you're going to get roasted, at least do it with some dignity, not whatever that soggy rebuttal was. Let's be honest, Starmer getting shredded by Clarkson wasn't just entertaining. It was clarifying. It reminded everyone just how allergic Starmer is to authenticity. And now, Starmer's left doing what he does best, awkwardly backtracking, issuing vaguely disapproving statements, and hoping no one noticed that Clarkson did in 5 minutes what the opposition's comms team couldn't do in 5 years. Highlight just how catastrophically uninspiring this man is. It's not that Starmer is terrible, it's that he's terminally beige. You can practically hear the static hum every time he speaks, like someone accidentally tuned into a channel that plays PowerPoint presentations narrated by a tax consultant.
Everything we're doing it is for our kids. It's their future, and everything is just going against it. This inheritance tax it's ridiculous. It's the final straw.
I'm just so emotional. Why do we as farmers have to do this? We shouldn't,
This government needs to realise it's never been hungry since World War II. They're going to be hungry because if they keep putting tax on the farmers, it's going to have a massive impact.
What Clarkson did, accidentally or otherwise, was strip away the PR varnish and expose the flaking wood beneath. He held up a mirror and Starmer blinked. Not because the reflection was ugly, but because there was barely one at all. That's the problem. There's no there. Just a well-pressed suit filled with caution and mild disappointment. And sure, some will say Clarkson's no political genius, and they'd be right, but maybe that's what makes it worse. When the guy, known for punching out metaphors about tractors, can see straight through your political persona, maybe it's time to stop hiring brand consultants and start rediscovering a spine. Because right now, Starmer's entire strategy seems to hinge on the belief that if he just stands still long enough, people will mistake him for stability. Spoiler, they won't. They'll just forget he was ever there. In the end, it wasn't Clarkson's wit that did the damage. It was Starmer's complete inability to withstand it. And in politics, if a bit of banter can unravel your credibility, you were never that credible to begin with.
Everything we're doing it is for our kids. It's their future, and everything is just going against it. This inheritance tax it's ridiculous. It's the final straw.
I'm just so emotional. Why do we as farmers have to do this? We shouldn't,
This government needs to realise it's never been hungry since World War II. They're going to be hungry because if they keep putting tax on the farmers, it's going to have a massive impact.
At the end of the day, Clarkson is going to go back to doing what he does best, testing tractors at full throttle, swearing at environmentalists, and writing columns that read like the diary of a particularly irate lawnmower. And honestly, good for him. At least Clarkson knows who he is, loud, ridiculous, and proud of it. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer will still be standing at a podium somewhere, blinking at an auto cue, trying to decide whether his party stands for progressive reform or just slightly more ethical PowerPoint templates. One moment he's channeling Blair, the next he's cosplaying as a human LinkedIn profile. And if this is supposed to be the great beacon of post-Tory hope, then Britain might be better off letting Clarkson write the next budget. At least we'd get something useful out of it. Fuel subsidies for combine harvesters, NHS ambulances fitted with twin-turbo V8s, and mandatory bacon rolls at every polling station. Sure, it would be chaotic, but at least it wouldn't be boring. And let's face it, Clarkson wouldn't need a public consultation or an internal review to know that a country needs functioning infrastructure and leaders with backbones, not made of couscous.
The former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has hit out at the government's changes to the inheritance tax rates for farms.
In an exclusive interview with GB News, he's called the changes absolutely mad.
It's a really, really dumb thing to do. We are struggling. I mean,
not the protest. I'm assuming the inheritance.
No, the inheritance tax thing. It is. We're struggling to keep people on the land, to make sure that farmers are incentivised to hand over their business to their descendants. I think it's mad. It's absolutely mad. I don't know why they've done it.
But here we are, watching Starmer continue his one-man tribute to the art of political fence-sitting. until he figures out how to lead with purpose, rather than cautiously tiptoe through every policy like he's trying not to wake a sleeping librarian. We're doomed to this parade of beige promises and lukewarm ambition. And now, just to put a final cherry on the tragic trifle that is modern British politics, he's managed to be politically upstaged by Jeremy Clarkson, a man whose closest brush with governance was probably yelling at a traffic warden for giving his Lamborghini a parking ticket. It's like losing a chess match to a man wielding a hammer. Except in this version, the hammer gets the last laugh and Starmer is still trying to find the rule book.